and welcome to Wellness Live. My name is Dr. Olivia Moses, and I'm the Director for Corporate Health and Wellness here at Loma University Health. Thank you for joining us for this session of Wellness Live. Now, this is our very first session that we are doing in this time of COVID, if you're watching us live. And we are in a different format. We are doing this with more of a Zoom type of format, and we are just so happy you have joined us. And we will be in this format for a little bit. But let's go back to COVID. This has been some interesting times, hasn't it? It has been changing every day. Our life has changed. Sometimes our emotions have changed. There has been stress in a lot of cases. And anxiety is a word you might hear a lot. Even before COVID, anxiety was a word you heard a lot. So we have an extremely special guest with us today. His name is Dr. Adam Aréchiga. He is the Associate Dean for Loma University School of Behavioral Health, and he is a perfect person to talk to us about anxiety. Now, he has been with the institution for 13 years, and I am very proud to say that before he started work, we were actually classmates in school when he was finishing one of his 2 doctorates. So I am very happy to have him as our guest today to talk about a very important mental health issue. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Adam Aréchiga.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moses. Right now, this is a very appropriate time to be talking about anxiety. And I've been asked to give a number of talks on the subject, and I enjoy speaking about anxiety. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I have a small little private practice at the Behavioral Health Institute where I work with anxiety disorders and test-taking anxiety and panic attacks. So this is exciting and very appropriate for the times. So when we think about anxiety, often we're thinking clinically about generalized anxiety disorder, and the hallmarks are excessive worry or anxiety, restlessness, you feel on edge, easily fatigued. You have difficulty concentrating, and sometimes your mind just might go blank. You might find yourself a little bit more irritable, or you notice muscle tension, or difficulty controlling the stress and worry that all of us experience at times. And then one of the single most common things that you find with anxiety is sleep disturbances. Now, a related disorder is panic disorder, where you might notice sudden and repeated attacks of intense fear, feelings of being out of control, such as during a panic attack, intense worries about when the next attack will happen, and then that leads to fear or avoidance of places where those attacks have occurred. And so with panic attacks, you might notice palpitations, your heart beating, accelerated heart rate, sweating, trembling, shaking, all the things we think of and worry about when it comes to panic attacks. Now, the good thing is that this is all about biology. All of us as humans share the same biology of the stress response. And so when I do my talks, I really try to emphasize the idea that this is about biology and not mental weakness. So the brain has 3 different functional areas that I'd like to kind of cover. Coming into the bottom of the brain, out of the spinal column, is what we call the area where it's involved more with the survival functions of the mind. Some of the areas for feeding and digestion, all of these things that keep us going. The autonomic nervous system, which we think of as the fight or flight system, is located in this area. Then more centrally to the brain, in the mid part of the brain, you have what we call the limbic system. And the limbic system is all about emotions and threat assessment. There are structures within the limbic system called the amygdala that are all about sensing stressors and threat in the environment or in our internal body state or in our thought process. And then the outside bumpy part of our brain is the cortex. And the cortex is all about thinking and rational thought and processing. The challenge is what happens when we have too much activation of the nervous system. So I'll give you a little example that comes from Daniel Siegel. He's a neuropsychiatrist at UCLA, and he writes a lot on the stress response. And so he says, imagine that this is your brain with two hemispheres coming out of the spinal column into the base of your brain. You have your survival functions, your autonomic nervous system. Fold your thumb over. The mid part of your brain is limbic, right? That's the emotional part. Fold your fingers over. The outside bumpy part is cortex. Now, the problem, when we perceive enough threat, the sympathetic nervous system starts to activate as we prepare for the fight or flight response. What happens is the limbic system, especially those structures called the amygdala, start to hijack the cortex. And so our cortex goes offline, if you will. And when that happens, our brain has shifted so that we can properly meet that threat. In a way, I tell people the fight or flight system is amazing. We are so elegantly designed. And in that moment, it prepares us for a superhuman feat. Unfortunately, when our cortex goes offline like this, our attention, memory, concentration, and our ability to engage in rational thought all starts to decrease. And that is the heart of the problem when we talk about stress. So this is just an example of the autonomic nervous system. There's two sides. Think of it as two sides of a coin. So the sympathetic revs us up for that emergent situation. Something really scary is coming through the door. I'm going to run really fast. But the sympathetic can also rev up if my thoughts are really focused on a threat. So for many of you, you've probably laid awake at night and you've tossed and turned because you're thinking about something important at work tomorrow. Or right now during COVID, you're wondering, am I going to be going into work? What's going on? And as our mind starts to ruminate on those stressors, what can happen is that sympathetic activates to the point where, now I'm finding it difficult to sleep. The good thing is that our body wants to return to a homeostatic state. And the parasympathetic is the opposite side of the autonomic nervous system. It helps calm us down. And I tell people you can remember the parasympathetic because a parachute helps slow you down. Now, the autonomic nervous system innervates our entire organ system in the body. Everything from our GI system to our lungs and our heart, even our bladder. So all these organ systems are connected and impacted by our perceptions of stress. Now, one of the models that I teach, and you might see videos of me teaching a model called the community resiliency model. And I've taken this concept of a resilient zone from that model. Think of our nervous system as wanting to be in balance, in homeostatic balance. When that happens, we think of that as being in our resilient zone or our window of tolerance. And that's where our nervous system functions the best. It's a state where we're well in terms of our mind, body, and spirit. And we're able to handle the stresses that come out throughout the day. So you can have a wide range of emotions when you're well regulated, when you're in that resilient zone. You can be upset and disappointed, but you won't be washed away by those emotions. The challenge is what happens if there's a stressor that activates the nervous system to the point where it takes us out of that resilient zone. So in a sense, that's when our cortex goes offline. So it can be any sort of a stressor. It can be a memory that's been triggered. It can be physical sensations such as pain that signal threat to the body. When that happens, we get bumped out of that resilient space. And we can either get bumped out on high or on low. And for this talk, when we talk about anxiety, we really focus more on getting stuck in the high zone. And that's where we notice being more edgy, irritable, angry, and with anxiety. But we can get bumped out on the low zone. And this is a similar process that happens. So the cortex is no longer able to rationally think about things. Instead, our brain has us focused completely on the stressor. Now, the good thing is there's many techniques, skills, things that we can do to help assist our nervous system in returning back to that homeostatic balance. So in times like COVID, all of us are undergoing stressors that we hadn't prepared for. There's all kinds of things happening with the economy, with loved ones, with our own personal health. So we think of that resilient space as being more shallow. So for right now, as I talk to my colleagues, as I talk to patients, all of us are finding ourselves a little bit more irritable, struggling a little bit more with sleep. And that makes sense because there's heightened anxiety and stress going on right now. The good thing is that the more that we practice techniques that help us manage that, the more that we live our life in a way that's promoting to health, we can deepen that. And what that means is we have a wider range of tolerance for stressful events. We can return back to that homeostatic balance easier when we're living our life and practicing techniques that support our own resilience. Now, I can't talk about stress without talking about the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And it took me 2 doctorates in 7 years to be able to have it roll off my tongue like that. But this is the system that really ends up leading to inflammation, that in the short run is very useful in an emergency situation where the nervous system gets activated. But long term, the release of stress hormones such as cortisol can be damaging and lead to increased inflammation in the body. Now, this might be a good time to pause because I covered a lot of information. So, Dr. Moses, can you help me with some of those questions?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you, Dr. Aréchiga. We actually have some questions coming through, and I think I'm going to start with the first one because it's COVID related. I think you touched on this. Can COVID-19 be considered a traumatic or stressful event?
Sure, absolutely. Great question. I think of it as a continuum where something might be mildly stressful on one side. We're a little late to work. We have a meeting that we got double booked in, all the way to something that is truly life-threatening, where our life is in jeopardy. And this is a situation where some of us might be going through truly life-threatening situations. I had a colleague who works at Loma who was diagnosed with COVID. And in talking with this gentleman over the weeks as he recovered, this was a significant stressor, not only for himself, but concerns with his wife and children who ended up getting COVID as well. So it depends. The one thing that we talk about with stress is it's about personal perception. Something that's stressful to me might not be stressful to somebody else. For instance, I know people that really enjoy spiders and they can let them crawl on their hand. I typically scream and run the other direction. It's a good question.
Great. And to go along with that, we have another question coming through saying, what should I do if I can't stop worrying?
So I'm going to cover some of those things that you can do. And a lot of those techniques that I teach in the community resiliency model are focused on that very aspect, learning to a set of techniques that we can use to regulate the nervous system in the face of a stressor.
So this might be something you're going over too, and I'm very fascinated about your resiliency model. And you talked about how wide, the resilience, how resilient you can become. So the question then is, if I feel like I have a very short zone, how do I get a wider one?
By practicing techniques that help support resilience, by living your lifestyle in a way that promotes wellness. And I'm going to be covering some of those things. Because I think many of you who are listening, that's why you tuned in, to get some of those practical applications.
So one of the things that you mentioned, and I definitely don't want this session to end before we really kind of talk about it, is I love what you said about this is biology. It is not mental weakness. And I think that sometimes in society, and sometimes even we ourselves, if we're going through anxiety or we have a panic disorder, or we are handling stress maybe not as strong as we see someone else, we think that there's some kind of weakness with ourselves. How do we address that, and how do we start changing the thinking around that?
Oh, that's an excellent question, Dr. Moses. Part of that starts with us from behavioral health, from mental health, trying to reduce stigma. And part of it is a change in the way that we think about some of these things. From a provider standpoint, often psychologists over pathologize. It's part of what we do. But what I love about models like the community resiliency model is it teaches that all of us have that same biology and all of us can learn to regulate the nervous system. And I'm a member of Loma Linda's International Behavioral Health Trauma Team, and we present this model all around the world, and we present some of these techniques to communities that have been hit by significant natural or man-made disasters. And so I've personally witnessed the resilience not only of individuals, but of communities home locally as well as abroad.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to get to one more question here, but for our live audience, if you have any questions for Dr. Aréchiga, please type them into the chat and we'll ask them live right here while we have the expert with us. So the question that we have coming through, Dr. Aréchiga, is when should I see someone to help me with my anxiety?
Wonderful question. So if you're really struggling in a significant way, you're finding it unable to work, significant difficulties with social interactions, with your health, those are times to find a professional. Absolutely. You can try to use techniques on your own and live a lifestyle that's promoting of that. But there might come a point to where you're unable to continue functioning as you were, and that's when you need to seek help. Okay.
Well, great. With that being said, I want to thank you for answering these questions. We're going to have a second question and answer. So go ahead and type your questions in, and let's get to the second half of Dr. Aréchiga's presentation.
Very good. Okay. So let's go on. Okay, let me get forward to where we were. Here we go. So let's talk about some of the physical effects of distress, and I'll just go through these really quickly because I want to spend more of the time on techniques to help. But all of us know that there's physical impacts of distress. So when I meet with patients, often I ask them, what are some of those physical signs that you're experiencing significant stress? Many of us notice when our necks are tight, our shoulders. If it's more significant, we start to notice different organ systems struggling. I work with patients with irritable bowel syndrome, for instance, problems with autoimmune disorders, things that get pretty significant. There's emotional symptoms of distress, the anxiety, which is the heart of this discussion. Just this sense of being out of control is challenging. And that can lead to things like substance abuse problems as people try to self-medicate, or phobias, or emotional outbursts. And it doesn't matter the education. I have plenty of examples of well-educated people who have really gotten dysregulated, and it's been difficult for them to interact with others. But I want all of you to come away with this message, and that is that humans are resilient. We are all very resilient. Even when you're talking about a life-threatening experience, only about a quarter of people develop PTSD after that. And I mentioned the trips that the trauma team has been on. We collect pre and post measures because we're doing research on this model. And I can tell you that we have seen resilience in communities such as West Africa, where we landed right after Ebola and worked with Ebola survivors in a community. So humans are very resilient, and this is an important thing to note. So the skills that I'm going to teach, some of those skills are very things that support that resilience. And I tell people right now during COVID, this is a difficult time, but we will get through it. We will get through it as individuals and as a community and a country. Now, what are some of those things? So CRIM, I called it a nervous system hack, and I'm just going to present just a couple quick little things about it. But in CRIM, what's really different is that we learn to read or track the nervous system, and we do that through physical sensations. Biologically, the term is interoception, but it's just awareness of body states. So for instance, if I were to ask each of you, When you're really stressed out, how do you know it physically? Most likely all of you will say, oh yeah, I clench my jaw and then I get a headache, or my neck muscles get really tight, or I get really sweaty. So you're already able to do that. But unfortunately, our brain, in its amazing design, has what we call a negativity bias. So the amygdala, which is all about threat assessment, is primed more for negative or stressful stimuli. And so our mind wants to go to those things. But within this model, what we learn is there's another side to the nervous system, and there are sensations that are more pleasant. And when we focus our attention on those, that allows the nervous system to calm down. It allows that regulation to start taking place again. And so when we identify a sensation, we simply ask ourselves, is that pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? A very simple way to try to identify which side of the nervous system that sensation is happening on. And so we just invite people to bring attention to their heart rate, their respiration rate, muscle tension, or relaxation. And we use that tracking as the central foundational technique in the whole model. It's wonderful. It can be used with any stress management skill, because through those sensations, you can tune into your body and you can more quickly pay attention to sensations associated with distress. And that tells you, okay, I should probably use a technique to calm the nervous system down. And then after you do that, once again, you can just check in, tune into those sensations, and you can tell that there's been a physical shift based on what you're aware of. It's really amazing. Now, I'll just share a second and a third technique real quick. So one of those big techniques is called a resource. And we teach people to find something from their life that brings them great happiness and joy. It can be a person, place, or thing. It can be a favorite memory from childhood. But I tell my patients, if you think of a good resource, you can't help but smile. And then what we do is we help individuals intensify that resource. So we start asking them to describe that resource through their senses. So for instance, let's say you love going to the beach. Then I would ask you, and when you're down at your favorite beach, what do you see? You know, maybe the waves and the sun. What do you hear? Well, I hear birds and the crashing of the surf and maybe children playing. What do you smell? Well, I smell the fresh air and the brine from the ocean. And what do you sense? What do you sense on your skin? Well, I can feel the warmth of the sand beneath my feet. When you build a resource and you add all of those senses, what that does is it intensifies that pleasant memory, and it allows the nervous system time to reset. It's incredibly powerful. So we don't have a lot of time, but I included this in there because this is an easy way for you to develop your own resource. What you would do is write down 3 different things that you think could be wonderful resources. And then I suggest you look at them, and whichever one puts that biggest smile on your face, you circle it. And then you write down 3 or more details, all those sensory details. What were the smells and the sounds? What did I see? And then you read that to yourself, and you build that image in your mind, and then you track the sensations associated with it. So you ask yourself, what do I notice happening on the inside? You might notice, oh, I take a deeper breath. Oh, my muscles are a little bit more loose. And that's just a sign that now your nervous system is going more into that parasympathetic response. And also all you're doing is just assisting this wonderful body in resetting that nervous system. It's amazingly powerful. So I would encourage you after this to work on finding your own resource. The third technique and the final one from the model that I'll present is grounding. And grounding is taught right now in almost every modality out there when it comes to stress management. But we do it a little bit differently in this model. So grounding is really just the act of making contact with the body and the environment. You can be standing, you can be laying. I ground while I fly. I don't always enjoy flying. You can ground while being in the ocean. But it's a great way to focus your attention on your body as it makes contact in a safe environment. And that helps direct your thoughts, which often race when we're anxious, direct them to that experience of being supported. and that helps slow down the nervous system. And so an easy way to do it is, as you're sitting in your chair, just slowly become aware of all the places your body makes contact with the chair and with the ground. And then just gently scan your body and pay attention to those areas that are more neutral or pleasant in sensation. And then once you've identified at least one place that's more neutral or pleasant, just take a nice deep healing breath and bring your awareness fully back to the room. And you can take much longer in doing an exercise like that. But what happens is, initially, that experience of grounding is calming for most everybody. And then once you identify a place in the body that's more pleasant or neutral, you can shift your attention to that area. And as you do that, that allows that nervous system to start to calm down. Surprisingly effective. One of the most useful techniques that I teach medical students who have test-taking anxiety is different techniques to ground while doing a significant exercise. Now, there are some other things that you can do to manage acute stress in the moment. Pause and take a drink of cool water and just notice the temperature of that water and the soothing nature. You might look around wherever you are and notice bright colors that catch your attention. I've worked with individuals who are surgical professionals who in the OR will often pause and find a wonderful color to help the nervous system reset. Notice the temperature in the room or the sounds. You know, if you're outside on a walk, pay attention to the pleasant smells or sounds or sights that you see. So these are just different quick ways that you can manage acute stress. The final one, pushing your hands against the wall, is something that a lot of people find helpful. It involves muscle tension and relaxation, which has been taught for a long time for nervous system release and stress management. Now, ultimately, it's nice if you're able to sit and take stock and look at some of your stressors. Right now, all of us are going through COVID-19. I don't have to go through all of these, but it's nice because then you can start to strategize how you can approach that stressor in the future. And I like to talk about the 4 A's of stress management. The first one is avoid. So plan ahead and rearrange the environment. I'm somebody who does not like rush hour traffic, so I adjust my schedule based on avoiding rush hour traffic. We can make some change in that environment. We can adapt and make a personal change, such as your thinking or emotions about something. And then finally, if it's a stressor that we can't do any of these others, we can accept it and learn to keep that part of our life going. Now, I don't have a lot of time to go into each of these, but I've included a slide that gives an example for each of these. Now, this is the wrong way to manage stress. If we're distressed and we're just pounding our head against the wall, don't do that. There are plenty of things that we can do that are healthy. And so that's really how I want to finish up the talk. Number one, lead a more healthy life, right? This is Loma Linda. Many of you work at Loma Linda. We're a blue zone, and that's all based on scientific stuff. It's all based on the idea that when we live a healthier life, that nurtures us and it improves our resilience. Exercise, quality sleep, proper water, eat healthy foods, seek to engage in activities that are fun and healthy. All of those things can improve our resilience. And then right now, nurture yourself. This is a difficult time. Take time, practice relaxation techniques. Take the time to read a book just for fun rather than a textbook. Spend time in nature or with a pet. Take a break and refocus your energy or really nurture your spiritual side. Another thing that many people, especially students that I work with, find helpful is learning to simplify and organizing their life. Once you prioritize your schedule and stressors, you can come up with a to-do list and work on time management skills so that you can achieve your goals. And it's important to learn to say no. At times, it's easier to get easy to get overcommitted, and it's helpful to be able to learn to give a polite, I would love to help you, but right now I simply don't have enough time. Then focus on completing those tasks one at a time. And sometimes for some individuals, it helps just to clean up the space where we work. It just helps us soothe that nervous system. Now, finally, stress management during COVID. One of my mentors, who I really appreciate, talks about practicing extreme self-care right now. And what that means is right now, I don't think any of us can afford to forget our own health and wellness. So we have to focus on those things we can control and not those you can't. And right now during COVID, there are many things that are outside of our control, and it is a challenging time. Stay connected with others, especially for fun, even if it's through Zoom or FaceTime or another platform. Take time to enjoy socializing with others. And then this is something I have to be careful of. Avoid too much negative news. It's easy to spend a lot of time going down the rabbit hole of negative news. Keep a list of silver linings. There are positives that are going to come out of this experience, not only personally, but for us as a culture and as a country. And I think it's important to keep those going. And then don't forget those healthy habits, the sleep, the exercise, the nutrition that are foundational for our wellness. And now, Dr. Moses, I think that's a good time for a few more questions.
No, this is great. This is such good information. One of the things that I love what you have said here, Dr. Aréchiga, is that a lot of times when we have stress or we have anxiety, a lot of times we think we just have to handle it as it comes, and there's nothing we can do about it. And what I love about what you said, we can do something. There are things that we can do to fight against these feelings that we're having. So I love how empowered that makes me feel. We do have some questions coming through, so let me ask them. This one talks about, this is from Edward, says, my sister can't sleep. I have advised her to do mindful meditation as I think he got some information about this and some practices through our family medicine department here on campus. He asks, is there anything specific that can help her get more resilience and allow her to have better sleep? And I think sleep is a big topic all the time, not just during COVID time. So do you have any advice about sleep in particular?
Yeah, number one, pay attention to sleep hygiene. So often in our connected society, we're on tablets, we're on iPads, we're watching TV right until it's time to go to bed. And there is a lot of research on blue light and the difficulty. So we need time to transition. And then going back to what I said before, it's really difficult for your nervous system to calm down if what you're watching right before you go to bed is all the stressful news stuff. Or if you're jumping from article to article and we don't know what's going on, that can be pretty stressful. So I do really recommend taking some transition time where you're doing something very enjoyable and pleasant and practice one of those techniques. I tell people download the iChill app, which was created for the community resiliency model. It is free. It is ICHILL. And in there, you can go through and you can click the button for grounding and you can listen to somebody lead you through a grounding script. And so I encourage the patients that I work with to do that right as they go to bed and in the morning when they wake up, so that both ends of the day, you get to anchor and get your nervous system more regulated. It's a really good question.
No, excellent. And this next question actually comes right off of the heels of what you just touched on. It says, do you have any stress management apps that you recommend? Yeah,
I really like iChill. It's free. The founder was incredible to make it free. It's available in Spanish as well. And all those techniques are available right there where there's a descriptor where you can listen to somebody talk about it and you can practice those techniques. I've given this out to thousands of people around the world, and I really do appreciate that app. It's the number one that I recommend.
Great. Another question that came through is, where can I find a list of support group options within Loma Linda?
Oh, that's a good question. Right now, some support groups are starting to transition, but the best is to try the Behavioral Health Institute or or the Behavioral Medicine Center. The BMC is the inpatient hospital side. The BHI is the outpatient side. I would contact both of those places and ask about groups that they might be running at the time.
This is also in addition to those mental health groups. We also have a robust chaplain service at Loma Linda that actually has groups on grief and all kinds of things with spiritual support as well. So I thought I'd add that in.
Absolutely.
Another question we have here, which is actually a good one, and talking about the spiritual piece, and unfortunately, this is the last question we have time for, but it says, I believe in prayer, but how do I talk to people who say that I can just pray my anxiety away?
So I think for many people, their connection with the higher power is very soothing. And when I help people develop resources, it's not that uncommon for them to choose one that's spiritual in nature. And so that can be very soothing to do that. That's different from praying away your stressors, right? So I always believe that there's a part that we have to play. Much like if I fall and get really injured, it might be nice to calm down, to send a little prayer, but then I also have to seek professional help. And so it's important to balance those things. So if your stress and anxiety has gotten to the point where nothing seems to help and you're no longer able to function like you were before, then it's important to seek professional help. Good question.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Aréchiga, for your time today. This is such an important topic, especially at this time. And if any of you have actually heard anything here that you want to share, please feel free to do that. After we are done with our live session, you will be able to send this YouTube link out to any family, friends, and colleagues that you may have that may be struggling with this and need to learn more about some of these techniques that Dr. Aréchiga talked about. So again, thank you, Dr. Aréchiga, for your time today. And I want to thank all of you for joining us here in Wellness Live. We will have another Wellness Live on June 24th. That's next month. And we will have another guest speaker. Her name is Dr. Stoletny, and she will be here speaking with us here on Wellness Live. So with that being said, I wanted to wish all of you health and wellness from all of us here from the Wellness Live team at Living Whole and Loma Linda University Health, and we want to wish you a good evening. See you next time.